It is dawn on September 22, 1980, and without warning, the sky over Iran cracks open. Iraqi aircraft roar in from the west. Bombs hit airbases at Mehrabad, Avaz, Dezful, and Kermanshah almost simultaneously. Before anyone fully understands what is happening, the second phase begins. Hundreds of Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles push across the border along a 600-kilometer front. Columns of T-55s and T-62s grind forward, supported by mechanized infantry and artillery that never stops firing. Their targets are clear: Khorramshahr, Abadan, Suzanjerd, and the entire oil-rich Khuzestan region. Inside Iran, the reaction is chaos. The country is only a year removed from the revolution. Command structures are fractured. Many senior officers were purged. Local garrisons have to make decisions on their own. Small Iranian units fight scattered, isolated battles along the border, often without communication or reinforcements. Militia volunteers, many barely trained, rush toward the front in civilian cars, motorcycles, even on foot. Some carry rifles, others carry nothing but determination. Iraqi aircraft strike roads and convoys, turning highways into burning lines of wrecked vehicles. Show the destruction clearly. Border towns like Khorramshahr and Mehran burning as residents flee. Bridges collapsing under Iraqi artillery fire. Iranian defenders forced back from trench to trench. Iraqi armored columns push deeper with alarming speed, bypassing resistance and encircling small pockets of Iranian troops who must choose between fighting alone or retreating through smoke-filled streets. By evening, the scale of the invasion becomes undeniable. Iraqi divisions spread out across southern Iran, closing in on key oil fields, refineries, and river crossings. Several Iranian bases are overrun. Communications between Tehran and the front lines break repeatedly. Civilians crowd shelters as air raid sirens echo across Khorramshahr and Abadan. Schools, mosques, homes all take hits. Fire trucks race from block to block, unable to keep up. Yet despite the mess, resistance hardens. Small Iranian units hold key intersections, destroying tanks at close range with RPGs. Anti-aircraft crews fire until their guns jam. Militia fighters ambush Iraqi patrols in palm groves and alleys, but it is not enough to stop the advance. Iraq pushes forward confidently, believing this will be a short war, a few weeks at most. As night falls on the first day, Iraqi commanders congratulate each other. They think Iran is collapsing. They think Khuzestan will fall by the end of the month. They think the revolution has left Iran too weak to fight. They think victory is almost guaranteed. They have no idea that they have just stepped into a conflict that will last 8 long years. A war of trenches, chemical weapons, city sieges, and unimaginable casualties. The invasion begins with confidence, but it is only the opening chapter of a nightmare neither side is ready for. No pause moves straight into the chaos of Khorramshahr, the city that becomes the symbol of the entire war. Iraqi armored units reach the outskirts within days. They expect the fight to last 48 hours. They expect a quick breakthrough and a clean victory. Instead, they enter a city that refuses to fall. Iranian defenders, a mix of regular army soldiers, Revolutionary Guard fighters, local police, and young volunteers, dig in across every district. They block streets with overturned buses, sandbags, and wrecked cars. Snipers take positions in half-ruined apartments. Machine gun nests appear in windows, alleys, mosques, and rooftops. Civilians who cannot escape join the defense, carrying ammunition, water, and messages from block to block. The fighting turns brutal almost immediately. Iraqi tanks attempt to push through the eastern districts but are ambushed at close range by small Iranian teams firing RPGs from doorways. Snipers pick off Iraqi infantry one by one. Iraqi artillery pounds neighborhoods until entire streets turn to rubble. Fire spreads uncontrollably. Smoke covers the city day and night. Inside Khorramshahr, every building becomes a fortress. Every staircase becomes a defensive line. Every courtyard becomes a battleground. Iranian fighters move through holes blasted into walls so they can shift positions without stepping into open streets. At night, the defenders sneak through alleys to launch sudden counterattacks. Iraqi troops soon realize they're fighting a war unlike anything they expected, room by room, floor by floor, corner by corner. Civilians are trapped everywhere. Families hide in basements as shells land overhead. Hospitals overflow. Volunteers carry wounded fighters on improvised stretchers made from doors and blankets. Food runs low. Water becomes precious. But the defenders refuse to leave. They believe that if Khorramshahr falls, southern Iran will fall with it. Iraqi commanders grow frustrated. Their advance slows from kilometers per day to meters per day. Every time they think they've cleared a block, Iranian fighters reappear behind them. Street battles leave bodies, burned-out vehicles, and debris everywhere. Iraqi morale drops. The two-day victory becomes 33 days of grinding urban warfare. Finally, after weeks of non-stop fighting, the city reaches its breaking point. Iranian defenders run out of ammunition. Reinforcements fail to arrive. Iraqi units push deeper and deeper until they seize the port area and cut the city in half. By late October, the remaining defenders attempt to break out. Many are killed. Many are captured. Khorramshahr finally falls. Iraqi soldiers raise their flag over the ruins. They celebrate a hard-won victory, but their losses are massive, far worse than expected. Iran, shocked and enraged, vows to retake the city no matter the cost. Khorramshahr must be freed becomes the national rallying cry. The fall of Khorramshahr does not break Iran. It galvanizes it. The war that Iraq thought would end in a month now begins its longest, bloodiest phase. By 1981, Iran finally regains its balance. The chaos after the revolution begins to settle, command structures slowly rebuild, and the Iranian military learns to operate under its new leadership. The Revolutionary Guard expands rapidly. The Basij mobilizes tens of thousands of volunteers, and the regular army reorganizes what remains of its armored units. Iran stops reacting and begins planning. The counteroffensive starts with Operation Tariq al-Quds in late 1981, hitting Iraqi positions around Boston. Iranian forces move fast, using surprise nighttime assaults to retake lost ground. Iraqi units, stretched thin and poorly coordinated, fall back under fierce pressure. Soon after comes Operation Fath al-Mabin in early 1982, one of the biggest Iranian operations of the war. The Iranians coordinate infantry, armor, artillery, and air support despite their shortages. They encircle several Iraqi divisions near Shush and Desful, smashing through defensive lines and capturing thousands of Iraqi soldiers. For the first time, Iraq's army looks vulnerable. Iraqi units retreat in panic across wide areas of Khuzestan, abandoning tanks, vehicles, and equipment as they flee. Iran's momentum grows with each advance, morale rising as they recover town after town. But the defining moment, the emotional core, comes in May 1982. Iran launches a massive assault to retake Khorramshahr, the city whose fall had become a national wound. The fighting is savage. Street battles, close-range ambushes, building-to-building pushes. Iraqi defenders hold on desperately, but Iranian pressure is relentless. On May 24th, after 33 days of combat, Khorramshahr is liberated. Iranian soldiers raise their flag over the ruins, and the entire country erupts in celebration, horns blaring in the streets, prayers in mosques, crowds flooding squares across Tehran. Iraq reels in shock. The psychological shift is immediate. Iran is no longer defending its soil. Iraq is now on the defensive, and the war's balance completely reverses. After pushing Iraq out of nearly all Iranian territory, Iran makes the fateful decision that changes the next 6 years of the war. It chooses not to end the conflict. Instead, Iran vows to remove Saddam Hussein from power entirely. This decision transforms the war from a defensive struggle into a long, grinding, cross-border conflict. In summer 1982, Iranian forces cross into Iraq, launching Operation Ramadan near Basra. What they encounter is unlike anything they faced on their own territory. Iraq builds an enormous defensive network: trenches, canals, minefields, barbed wire, anti-tank ditches, and fortified strongpoints stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Iraqi artillery rains shells day and night. Their air force, supplied with new Soviet and French aircraft, hits Iranian columns before they reach the front. Iran responds with mass infantry assaults. Basij volunteers, some barely adults, charge in waves across open desert at night, trying to overwhelm Iraqi lines with sheer numbers. Many never make it past the minefields. Others fall to machine gun fire, chemical shells, and entrenched armor. But Iran keeps coming, believing victory will break Saddam's regime. The war settles into a brutal rhythm. Iran launches new operations every few months: Dawn operations, Khaybar, Badr, Karbala. Each time, thousands of infantry push into Iraqi trenches, securing narrow footholds before being pushed back by counterattacks. Iran gains ground, then loses it. The front barely moves. By 1983, the war has devolved into a modern version of World War I: static lines, mass casualties, night raids, endless artillery duels. Muddy trenches fill with rainwater in winter and scalding heat in summer. Bodies lie between the lines, unreachable under enemy fire. Both armies dig deeper. Both armies rotate exhausted divisions in and out of the front. Both armies take staggering losses. Then Iraq escalates further. In 1983, Iraq uses chemical weapons, mustard gas, and later nerve agents to break Iranian assaults and terrorize survivors. Clouds of toxic gas roll across trenches, burning lungs, skin, and eyes. Iranian troops have almost no protection at first. Casualties rise sharply. Still, Iran refuses to stop. Despite losses, despite exhaustion, despite global pressure to negotiate, Iran pushes deeper into Iraqi territory. The war becomes a test of endurance, ideology, and national will, and neither side shows any sign of stopping. The war spills into the Persian Gulf by 1984, turning the region into one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth. Iraq, frustrated by Iran's refusal to accept a ceasefire, begins targeting Iranian economic lifelines. Iraqi aircraft armed with French Exocet missiles strike Iranian oil terminals, offshore platforms, and tankers carrying crude to world markets. Iran responds immediately. Any ship aiding Iraq or sailing from Gulf Arab ports becomes a potential target. Commercial shipping lanes turn into battlefields. Tankers burn in the water, columns of black smoke rising for miles. Insurance rates skyrocket, and shipping companies beg the world's navies for protection. Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, terrified that the war will strangle their own exports, start quietly supporting Iraq with money, fuel, and intelligence. Iran retaliates by striking tankers coming from Kuwaiti ports. Soon, tankers sail through the Gulf with patchwork repairs, scorch marks across their hulls, and armed escorts whenever they can get them. Above the Gulf, the air war explodes. Iranian F-14 Tomcats, the most advanced fighter in the region, duel with Iraqi Mirage F-1s and MiG-25s. Radar locks, missile launches, and sonic booms become routine. Iranian Tomcats use their long-range Phoenix missiles to shoot down Iraqi bombers trying to reach the Gulf. Iraq adapts, flying low over the water, hiding in radar shadows, and using tanker ships themselves as cover. Iran fires back with surface-to-air missiles and patrols its offshore platforms like floating fortresses. As losses rise, Kuwait turns to the United States for protection. The U.S. Navy enters the war zone not as a combatant but as an escort force, reflagging Kuwaiti tankers and sending destroyers to guide them through mines and missile threats. But neutrality is impossible in a war this chaotic. U.S. warships clash with Iranian patrol boats, hunt Iranian naval mines, and fire warning shots at approaching aircraft. The Gulf becomes a three-sided battlefield: Iraq hitting Iranian oil, Iran hitting Gulf shipping, and the U.S. trying to keep the lanes open while getting pulled deeper into the conflict. What began as a border war now threatens global energy supply. By the mid-1980s, the Iran-Iraq war descends into its darkest phase: chemical weapons, missile attacks on cities, and endless attrition with no victory in sight. Saddam Hussein authorizes widespread use of mustard gas and nerve agents to break Iranian offensives. Iranian soldiers advancing across open fields suddenly collapse, choking, blinded, or convulsing. Gas shells burst over trenches, bunkers, and marshlands. Survivors stumble back with chemical burns covering their arms and faces. Iran lacks protective gear. Many soldiers fight with only cloth masks soaked in water or urine. Chemical warfare becomes a grim constant. Clouds drifting across battlefields, gas alarms wailing, entire units forced to retreat or die where they stand. But civilians suffer far worse. In Kurdish areas of northern Iraq, entire villages are targeted with chemical attacks meant to crush suspected support for Iran. The most notorious massacre, Halabja, 1988, kills thousands of men, women, and children in one day. The war's brutality reaches new extremes, and the international community remains divided and hesitant to intervene. At the same time, both Iran and Iraq begin launching ballistic missiles directly at each other's cities. It becomes known as the War of the Cities. Tehran, Baghdad, Isfahan, Basra, Qum, all are hit. Schools, markets, apartment blocks, and power plants are destroyed with no warning. Air raid sirens constantly scream through the streets. Families sleep in basements. Children walk to school past the rubble of buildings hit the night before. Millions flee urban centers, overwhelming rural towns with refugees. The psychological strain breaks entire communities, yet both nations refuse to stop. On the front lines, the war deteriorates into pure attrition. Iran launches massive offensives, Operations Dawn, Badr, Karbala, but each ends in catastrophic losses. Basij volunteers charge minefields. Armored units stall in mud-choked marshes. Artillery duels last days without movement. Iraq counters with tanks, aircraft, and chemical shells, pushing Iran back but unable to land a decisive blow. Both economies begin collapsing. Oil exports shrink. Infrastructure falls apart. Hospitals overflow with wounded soldiers and civilians. Still, neither side is willing to negotiate. Iran wants Saddam removed. Iraq wants Iranian influence crushed forever. The front barely moves, but the casualties never stop. The war becomes a machine devouring men, money, and morale. By 1988, hundreds of thousands are dead, millions displaced, and both governments are desperate but still locked in a conflict that has no clear ending. By 1987, the war is running on fumes. Both Iran and Iraq are bleeding dry. Iran's economy is collapsing under sanctions, oil field damage, and the sheer cost of mobilizing millions of soldiers and volunteers. Iraq survives only through huge loans from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other Gulf states, but even those lifelines are strained to the breaking point. Saddam owes billions, and creditors are losing patience. On the battlefield, both sides are exhausted. Iran can no longer launch the massive offensives that once pushed deep into Iraqi territory. Iraq, however, has rebuilt its army with foreign weapons, new training, and huge stockpiles of chemical munitions. Saddam decides it's time to break Iran once and for all. Meanwhile, the Persian Gulf becomes the center of global attention. The U.S. Navy, already escorting reflagged Kuwaiti tankers, clashes directly with Iranian forces. In Operation Praying Mantis, April 1988, American destroyers and aircraft sink Iranian ships, knock out oil platforms, and cripple a large part of Iran's navy. Iran realizes quickly that it cannot fight Iraq and the United States at the same time. International pressure grows. Oil prices drop. Iran struggles to import food, medicine, even spare parts for basic equipment. The population is exhausted. Cities still face missile attacks. Frontline troops lack supplies. Families have been sending sons to war for nearly a decade. Iraq senses the shift. Backed by Gulf money, Soviet equipment, and Western intelligence, Saddam launches new offensives using tanks, artillery, and chemical weapons on a massive scale. Iranian units, worn down and outmatched, retreat across the border. For the first time since the early 1980s, Iraq is clearly winning. By summer 1988, Iranian leaders accept reality. Ayatollah Khomeini announces that Iran will accept UN Resolution 598, calling it drinking a chalice of poison. After 8 years of war, the guns finally fall silent, not because either side achieved victory, but because both countries were stretched to the breaking point, and collapse was no longer a distant threat but an immediate one. The Iran-Iraq War was one of the longest and most brutal conflicts of the 20th century, and it lasted 8 full years because every force that could prolong it did. First, leadership on both sides refused compromise at every turn. Saddam Hussein invaded believing Iran was weak and would collapse quickly after the Islamic Revolution. When the invasion stalled, pride and fear of humiliation pushed him deeper into the conflict. On the other side, Iran's revolutionary government viewed the war as an existential battle for survival. They refused peace until Saddam was overthrown, convinced that accepting anything less would betray the sacrifices of hundreds of thousands of fighters. Neither leader could afford to look weak, so the war continued. Second, ideology made the conflict even more stubborn. Saddam framed the war as a defense of Arab nationalism against Iranian influence. Iran framed it as a holy struggle, a sacred resistance against aggression. Tens of thousands of Basij volunteers joined the front lines with religious motivation, believing martyrdom was victory. This ideological fire kept Iran fighting long after military logic suggested ending the war. In Iraq, Saddam used nationalism, propaganda, and fear to force unity. Any hint of dissent was crushed. When leaders view war as identity rather than policy, peace becomes unthinkable. Third, foreign powers poured fuel on the fire. Iraq received money, weapons, intelligence, and political support from the Gulf states, the Soviet Union, France, and quietly at certain points the United States. Iran, isolated by sanctions, relied on North Korea, China, Libya, and covert deals like the Iran-Contra affair to keep its military supply. Neither side ever ran out of weapons long enough to force negotiations. Outside powers didn't want either Iran or Iraq to win. They wanted the fight to continue so neither state became dominant. That international tug-of-war turned the battlefield into a long-term stalemate. Fourth, the nature of the fighting made victory nearly impossible. Once Iran pushed Iraq back in 1982, the war transformed into trench warfare across open deserts, marshes, and fortified lines. Minefields stretched for kilometers. Artillery duels lasted days. Chemical attacks made offensives nearly suicidal. The terrain offered no quick breakthroughs. Armored pushes bogged down in marshlands. Human wave assaults collapsed under machine gun fire. The front barely moved for years. It echoed World War I, massive casualties, minimal gains. Fifth, economic pressure and internal exhaustion eventually forced peace, but only after both nations were nearly broken. Iran's economy crumbled under prolonged mobilization and U.S. naval clashes. Iraq's debt soared past $80 billion, mostly owed to Gulf states that later demanded repayment. Civilians suffered constantly. Missile strikes, gas attacks, power outages, rationing, and the loss of an entire generation of young men. Families lived with grief, fear, and instability for nearly a decade. By 1988, both nations realized the cost of continuing outweighed any possible victory. Practical reality, not diplomacy, ended the war. The result was staggering. Over 1 million casualties between the two sides. Entire cities destroyed: Khorramshahr, Basra, Abadan, Marin. Infrastructure shattered. Airports, refineries, ports, and pipelines in ruins. Millions displaced. Economies thrown back decades. And after all this sacrifice, all this destruction, the border returned to almost exactly where it was in 1980. No territorial gains, no decisive victory, only devastation. But the war reshaped the Middle East. Iraq emerged heavily militarized and deeply in debt, leading directly to Saddam's invasion of Kuwait and the Gulf War. Iran emerged isolated but hardened, building a military doctrine based on missiles, asymmetric warfare, and regional proxy forces. The Gulf states, terrified by the conflict next door, deepened ties with the United States, laying the foundation for decades of American military presence in the region. The Iran-Iraq War didn't just scar two nations, it set the political and military landscape for the entire Middle East that still exists today. 8 years, 1 million lives, and nothing changed, except the future of the Middle East.